Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, March 8th, 2022, and today we're going to be taking a look at the 2022 United States House elections and refuting a claim that I've seen far too commonly on my channel and on a number of other channels and other social media platforms that the 2022 midterm elections are going to be very similar to the 2010 midterm elections or even the 2014 midterm elections. And for a while, a year ago, I might have entertained such a thought, knowing that the Democratic Party would have an advantage over the Republican Party going into it from the very beginning, with Joe Biden's approval rating being up, but knowing that that would eventually fall, and at some point the GOP would become the favorites to win the House of Representatives. You know, it became very clear once Joe Biden started dipping down that it was a point of no return for the Democratic Party. But to compare it to extremities such as the 2010 midterm election is really just disingenuous. I think that looking at our current environment and our current circumstances, there just simply isn't going to be a 2010 type of red wave. Number one, most namely because the Democrats don't have as much of a room to fall. That means they don't have as large of a majority that they could possibly see the GOP take away from them. And I mean that honestly. I mean, looking at the 2020 House election results, the Democratic Party didn't exactly perform up to expectation. So all around, what I want to really hunker in on this point is that the 2010 midterms are not going to be similar, or sorry, the 2022 midterms rather, are not going to be similar to the 2010 midterms. And there are a number of reasons why, and I think that it does deserve a bit of discussion because we won't really have a midterm to compare this to. There won't be a midterm, at least from where we stand at our current point, where one political party is just barely above the other, and we have such a different type of international environment, a different type of national environment amidst a pandemic. I mean, there are a lot of things that will go into these midterms and a lot of things that definitely deserve a lot of discussion. So, looking at the 2010 House elections, if you aren't super familiar with what happened, the Republican Party won control of the House pretty handedly, right? Looking at this map, you found the Republican Party won the national popular vote by 7 percentage points. Now, that probably won't happen for decades. I'm being completely honest with you. The Democratic Party is not going to be the favorites to, not favored to win the popular vote in most elections. Looking at California's growth, at Texas's growth, at Florida's growth, at New York's growth, these major large population states are going to be driving factors as to why the Democratic Party, in many cases, can outperform in terms of the popular vote. States such as California have less representatives in comparison in terms of proportion to population to states such as Idaho or New Hampshire. And while that is a discussion about the validity and the fairness of our House and congressional maps, that's not a discussion for this video. But the 2010 midterms were a monumental one because it was right after Obama had been elected for the first term, and the Democratic Party really messed up. And I don't mean just a little bit type of messed up. I mean absolutely got obliterated nationwide. Take a look at this map. This was just 2 years prior, and no, there was not redistricting done before the next election. So no, the Republican Party did not gerrymander the maps to make it so. At least in this exact situation, many maps were gerrymandered, as they have been for centuries now. But looking at the map, this is the same exact map as what was put forth in 2010. Look at it, and then boom. It goes from blue to red. From blue to red. I mean, such a substantial shift. 257 Democratic seats to 178 turns into Republicans at 242 to 193. Just looking at it, I mean, you're talking about Arkansas going from 75% Democratic delegation, Mississippi, 75%, West Virginia, 67%, right? A split delegation in Idaho, a single Democrat in North Dakota, in South Dakota, right? Democrats winning nearly everything in many other states, winning all of New Mexico. In 2010 hits, and what do you find? Is that the Democratic Party loses a number of states. Even states such as California reduced down in terms of their representation. Democrats get 34 to 19. States such as New Jersey reduced to 7 to 6. They lose Pennsylvania. They lose Illinois, for crying out loud. They lose Michigan, right? They lose Wisconsin. And keep in mind, this was a very pivotal election. This was a huge election. North Carolina, surprisingly enough, ended up going to the Democratic Party. But with this wave, what it did was give the Republican Party an opportunity to win a bunch of state legislative races, to win governor races, enough to gerrymander the maps, so that way moving forward, Democrats were never able to win the majority until 2018 when they did so, and then nearly lost it again in 2020. So now we're fast forwarding to 2022. You saw what happened in 2010. What is happening right now? Well, we aren't done. We aren't done knowing how many of these districts are going to go because we don't have all of the districts. There are 5 states outlying in terms of drawing new congressional maps: Missouri, Louisiana, Florida, New Hampshire, and Ohio. The Supreme Court today saying that they will not rule on the new congressional maps until March 10th, so 2 days down the line, until the Congressional Redistricting Committee can give them a reason as to this commission, a reason as to why and how they came up with the maps that they are putting forth. And I'm assuming so because it is expected to be struck down. So you have Ohio, which is a populous state. It has 15 districts. You have Florida, which has 29 districts. You have Missouri, which has 8 districts. You have Louisiana, which has 7 districts. And you have New Hampshire, which has 2, which doesn't leave us with a significant amount, but it does leave us with a good amount. It leaves us with a good amount that will determine partisan control. Now, today marks a milestone based off of our current congressional map. The Democratic Party now matches where they were in the old map, based off of old ratings without Florida confirmed, without Louisiana, without Missouri, without Ohio, and without New Hampshire, which means every single time forward, every single step further, every single time a new map is confirmed, the Democrats expand relative to their 2020 numbers. So that's a good sign for the Democratic Party and a bad sign for the GOP. The Democratic Party went to very extreme lengths to ensure that this map would favor them. While they did lose states such as Tennessee and Utah, they weren't able to prevent gerrymanders in there, in Indiana, right? What they were able to prevent were gerrymanders in North Carolina, where they got the courts on their side, in Ohio, where they got the courts on their side. The only real redistricting wins for the GOP are Tennessee, Georgia, Utah, and potentially other states that were going to have at least one competitive district that simply do not anymore. And many courts are expected to strike down potentially additional maps, such as the one in Kansas, which actually gerrymandered one of those Democratic districts, and now the Democratic-controlled Supreme Court, I believe it's a 5-2 majority, is expected to strike it down as well. Things just aren't going in the right direction for the GOP, which means that we won't be seeing a 2010 type of wave off of redistricting alone. Now, I made the, miscalculated and uninformed claim that redistricting alone would hand the GOP the House majority about a year ago. And under the impression that, looking at the GOP advantage of the Democratic Party, that probably would have been true had the GOP gone to extreme lengths or had they been able to put forth and solidify what they wanted to propose. For instance, in North Carolina, the reason why that isn't more gerrymandered is because Republicans tried and failed. They put forth a map that gave Republicans 11 districts and Democrats 3. You know what happened? The Supreme Court said no, and you need to be proportional. And guess what happens when you go proportional? Democrats get nearly the majority of the seats. You take a look at Ohio, what happened? Well, the Republicans put forth this exact map. Well, slightly different, but, same in terms of House delegation. And it ends up with 13 Republicans and 2 Democrats. The Supreme Court said no. They put back another one. They said no. They put back another one. And in 2 days' time, they are going to say no again. The Republican Party, if left unchecked, would be ahead right now. And I say that because the Republican Party has the means to do so. They are being checked even by sometimes their own governors who don't want to see a gerrymander. For instance, in the state of Iowa, you didn't see an extremely aggressive gerrymander even though it was absolutely possible. In other states, you could have seen more aggressive gerrymanders, but again, it was prevented by sometimes governors saying and putting their foot down and saying, no, we will not gerrymander. All of these things together add to the Democratic Party's ability to hold on to the number of seats they have right now. And when you look at the Cook Political Report and many other polling firms and political firms that look at House elections and look at these ratings, and they put a determining number to them. They say, this is likely Dem, likely Republican, a lean Dem, likely, toss-up, things like that, right? When you look at the ratings that they have put forth, the Republicans and Democrats actually don't see many differences. You're looking at the Republicans expected to pick up, 6-7 seats from the Democratic Party. The Republicans are expected to lose about 6 to 7 seats to the Democratic Party. Not all of them are indicated here. Some of them are in the safe column. For instance, on the Republican side, you're going to find that Georgia's 6th congressional district is safe red because it has been gerrymandered extremely. And you're not going to see that on this map. But the point is that you aren't really seeing many differences between our ratings here. If anything, it's an eye for an eye type of scenario where the Republicans win a district, now the Democrats win a district. The Republicans win a district, now the Democrats win a district, or vice versa. That's what's happening here. You're not seeing a monumental shift away from the Democratic Party. And the interesting thing about this is that President Obama during this time frame in 2010 actually was only disapproved of on election day by about 2 to 3 percentage points. Well, guess what? Joe Biden is in a much worse position. But here's the difference. That much worse position for Joe Biden doesn't translate to a generic ballot lead for the Republican Party. Biden being down 9 translates to a 2-point lead for Republicans. That's a 7-point drop-off. Looking at the generic ballot in November of 2010, Republicans were up 9.4%. On that same day, end of November 2010, you will find that the Republican Party, Barack Obama was disapproved of by about 5, at different points, 2 points, 3 points, right? You're talking about a 4 to 5 point increase relative to Obama's disapproval rating. So when you see that, you find that voters were much more inclined to vote for Republicans in 2010 than they are in 2022. There are just too many things telling us that 2022 simply can't be a 2010 type of race. And it might be a little too early to say that, but I don't necessarily know if that's true. I said a year ago Republicans were going to win the House, and I stand by that point. But I said it in an expectation that the map would be more similar to 2010 or 2014 or more so 2012. But knowing that the Democratic Party has not only maintained what they have, but actually expanded in terms of PVIs, in terms of partisan leans, in terms of individual districts being favored for the Democratic Party, the fact that they have expanded is an alarming thing for the GOP. It is an alarming thing because it takes away their possibility of being monumental leaders, going in after 2022 with a mandate. If the Republican Party can only get a majority by 5 to 10 seats, that tells us that they can't take advantage of Biden's disapproval rating. That also tells us that in 2024, there probably won't be a further Republican wave. 2022 is going to be a true test for the Republican Party because they have been given so many opportunities, yet are completely unable to take that and turn it into a 2010, 2014, 2010 in specific Tea Party type of wave against a first-term Democratic president. If anything, if I was a Republican strategist, I would be frustrated. Frustrated knowing the GOP had a 130-seat advantage over Democrats when it came down to redistricting, and they failed to use it effectively. Knowing that in 2010, with a president of the United States who was disapproved of by a significantly less margin, translated into a Republican skyrocket lead, and they can't do that now. Knowing that our national environment on the international level, on the COVID level, is bad, and it negatively reflects on the president, and yet people still don't want Republicans in leadership, this is why you would be frustrated. This is why if I was advising the NRSC or the NRCC, this is why I would be frustrated, right? Because it simply doesn't play into the narrative that 2022 is going to be a red wave, a narrative that was established the moment that Joe Biden won the election, a narrative that has been established in modern political history every single time an incumbent party wins the White House, knowing 2 years later that they will lose at least one chamber. There are very few exceptions to this rule, 1998 and 2002 in modern history. Even under Reagan, the Republicans could not win control of the House of Representatives. And they didn't in his midterm years. Looking at our map here, looking at our redistricting, looking at our generic ballot, looking at our approval rating for Obama and, Biden in comparison and the ratings, nothing seems to be lining up. Again, I'm not going to deny that Republicans are favored to win the House, but things like this question whether or not they are going to win by any type of substantial margin at all. They could very well win, but what is a 4 to 5 seat advantage for the GOP going to do? Especially when there are Republicans who have voted with the Democratic Party in the past. 10 House Republicans voted to impeach President Trump. If any of them roll over, or if anyone like them replaces them, because many of them have chosen to retire after that decision, you are going to find that Democrats, in a similar fashion that Republicans find Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, could court these Republicans to vote in their favor, or to at least abstain from a vote. A majority for the GOP needs to be strong. A majority needs to be reminiscent of what we saw in 2010, because this is the only type of majority that can vehemently oppose President Biden with some type of mandate. Because if Republicans win control of the House in 2022 in what is expected to be a red wave by 5 seats, I guarantee you 2 years later they're losing it. 2 years later, when Democrats retake that popular vote, because it is a presidential election, even if a Republican does win the presidential election, it will probably be by the electoral vote and not the popular vote, the House goes the other way. You cannot afford to have this much of a map, against you, right? Even between 2010 and 2012, Republicans saw a fall off of about 8 seats, which means that if that was to be replicated, that means the Democratic Party could potentially win back control of the House. A lot of political implications simply based off of this alone. When Republicans won in 2010, it lasted them 8 years. If Republicans win in 2022, chances are it'll last them 2 years. And that's the unfortunate reality for the GOP. And that's the unfortunate reality of not having a 2010 type of mandate or a 2010 type of year. So to recap, There is just too much against the GOP at this time for me to confidently say, or at least entertain, any type of reality in which 2022 ends up like 2010. It is possible, as the months go further down the line, if Biden royally screws up with Ukraine, with Russia, with China, with COVID, there are a lot of possibilities. Everything you do as president is watched. Everything that happens is your fault or under your presidency, under your leadership. Some good things, some bad things, we will see what happens. It is possible, again, later down the line that this happens, but right now, it isn't what I'm seeing. And when I see pundits and, other, networks say that 2022 is going to be similar to 2010 or has the very real, groundwork and framework from what we have seen, in comparison, it really doesn't. In comparison, it doesn't look like it's going to be much of a red wave at all. I do think, again, Republicans will win control of the House, but we're not talking about an extremely substantial margin. And in 2024, it is entirely possible that the Democratic Party wins it back, potentially with ease. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.